Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Conversations in the QC. I'm Randy Terry. On today's show, we are celebrating the end of 2023 with a look back at some of the conversations we've had this year. And we'll get to that in a moment. But first, we're going to start off with a very special conversation. You know, this project started in response to what's happening in Black communities, both here in the Quad Cities and all across the country. But you won't find many shows that tackle the topics that we do here. And there are lots of people who are responsible for Real Conversations coming on the air. And I'm joined now by two people who you don't see on this program often, but they are integral in the continuation of it. Tracy Singleton, of course, the executive director of TMBC at the Lincoln Center, and Sue Ramsett, the vice president and general manager of KWQC Television. Thank you so much for being here, both of you.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
Of course. So take us back to when this program first got started. What did it look like? And of course, what was the inspiration behind it? Because there was some strong inspiration behind it.
Right. So it actually started in 2021. We were approaching Black History Month, and it was still COVID. I had just started at Lincoln Center as executive director, and February was going to be our introduction to the community as a Lincoln Center. And so we were trying to come up with different things we could do virtually for Black History Month because we were still in the midst of COVID. And so I got the idea of Scooby Mageza was here at the time, and he and I were good friends, and he was part of my program. So I called him. I was like, hey, do you think you could just do like a show once a week just on Facebook? I got the inspiration from a podcast called Conversation with a Black Man or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so usually Scooby was like, yeah, I'll do it. But I think with this, I think he could sense where this could possibly go. So instead of like, yeah, Tracy, I'll just do it from home or whatever, he said, let me bring in, like my boss, and let me talk to them and see what we can come up with. So that was my first introduction to Sue. And it did just start off as that for Black History Month. But in the middle of the month, we get a call from Sue like, hey, would you be interested in doing this beyond Black History Month? And I'm all for that. And I didn't know what that looked like or how we would do it. But I was like, sure. I have a habit of saying yes and then figuring things out later, right? So that's kind of how it got started.
Yeah. And Sue, talk about that phone call. What inspired that? What did you see that made you think there could be more to be had by this?
Sure. I think one of the conversations we were having in the newsroom and in the community was how do we take Black History Month and continue telling those stories so it's not just a once a year kind of event. Also at that time, when the Black Lives Matters protests and events were happening, there were a lot of conversations in the newsroom about whether or not this was a political hot potato. And so initially there was a little bit of fear. There was a reluctance to come out and talk about some of these basically human rights issues. We are fortunate to have a company in Gray Television that actually came out and said, we support stations in covering this local however they feel is right. And this is not a political issue. This is a matter of basic human rights. And if we want inclusive communities and inclusive workplaces, then we need to be able to talk about this. So when Scooby Mageza, who was our sports anchor at the time, he took full advantage of it right away. He was right out of the gate, and he did a beautiful piece at the end of a weekend newscast talking about what it was like to be a Black man in this industry, in this community. And I think our response to that, if you remember that, it was amazing.
Nobody should be treated differently because of the color of their skin. It ain't right. That's why I'm thankful for TV6 right now, because they let me express myself. Some of you see it. I talk with slang, you feel me? I play music under everything I do, and I love bringing the culture into my work. That's who I am. That's why I'm so enthusiastic and out of the box with the things that I do. Change is coming. And the movement has so much momentum right now. I love it. And the more we can speak up and have real conversations like the former Hawkeye football players, then the brighter our future can be.
And we felt like we were really onto something and really opening the door to have some of these important conversations. So quite honestly, it was, we were all a little bit nervous about it. How would it be received? Right. How would he be received? And as it turned out, I think it's just one of the best things we've ever done.
Yeah, and I think that's a big piece of it as well. You know, obviously it's an important conversation to have, but how does that conversation begin? And in this case, as you mentioned, it began with that piece done by Scooby.
did.
Something you don't really see often, especially here in the Midwest. What was the response like? I'm interested to see from both of your perspectives, from the station and the viewers who saw it. What was their response?
It was extremely positive, I think, right off the bat. So I think, especially at that time. So now this feels. I think we all feel pretty comfortable. We're in our
Right.
groove with this program. But initially, again, there was that uncertainty on how this was going to be received. So, boy, I don't know. I guess I just think as the more we talk about this, the more comfortable we get talking about it. And so I think, especially for white people in the community, even if you feel strongly that it's the right thing to do, you walk around feeling like you're kind of walking on glass, that you're going
Right.
to put your foot in the mouth, and you're, even if you're well intended, you're going to say the wrong thing. So part of where I hope that we are today is that we're more comfortable, not just talking about it, but more importantly, listening. Right. So as white people in this community, we need to be comfortable listening and thinking and talking less.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tracy, yeah, from your perspective, obviously you're very plugged into this community.
Mhm.
When Scooby first came out with that piece, what was some of the reaction that you noticed?
I watched it live, like as he was doing it, and I said a little prayer for him, right? Because you just don't know how, I try to stay away from comments on Facebook and social media because you will have those authentic conversations. And you might not always agree, but at least we're getting people who are at least open to hearing a different perspective on things and having healthy conversations instead of just having an idea in your mind of how things are without knowing the whole story. So I think what he did at that time is he started the conversation for real conversations. And as Sue mentioned, as we keep going with this, I get stopped in the grocery store. I get stopped at events and we talk about the conversations. And so I think what we're doing here is making it easier or providing that platform or doing that icebreaker that makes people want to have that conversation and feel okay having that conversation without, you're never going to say the right thing or the perfect thing at the right time, but at least you're talking about it.
Yeah. And you mentioned some of the reaction that you have been receiving from this program now that it is fully on the air and now a regular program. Sue, what kind of reaction have you noticed?
Again, it's extremely positive, I think. We, as an organization of journalism, which we are here at TV6, one of our founding principles is that we provide a voice to the voiceless, or we amplify the voices of those who can't speak loudly enough for themselves. And so if we go back to that's why we exist, it's one of the important ways that we exist to serve our community. I think we're doing our job on this front, or at least we're trying to. There are a lot more conversations to be had. But I think we find, from a ratings perspective, right, more and more people are tuning in, more and more people are finding this program on our streaming platforms. They're talking about it, they're sharing it. And that's really what it's all about, right? Is we have the conversation here, but then how can those conversations continue to have a life and continue to be heard and had by others?
Yeah. And honestly, it's not just here in the Quad Cities in terms of recognition that this program is getting. Obviously, there was a group of us last year that had the great privilege of heading out to Washington, D.C. To be a part of the National Association of Broadcasters Service to America Awards, for which Real Conversations was nominated for an award. Obviously, as we mentioned, there's a lot of people that put a lot of hard work into this program and to put it on every month and having those difficult conversations. When you look back at all that and you see the really little time that it took for this program to get nominated on a national level and recognized, how does that make you feel?
For me, when I found out about it, I was actually like shocked, because we're in our silos, right? And so you think like, oh, this just matters here. But really the whole concept of Real Conversations is that these are national issues, national conversations that being here in Davenport, Iowa, or even the Quad Cities, people might not think those things are happening here, but they are. So let's talk about it. So after the shock wore off, I was like, yeah, we can do this, and we need to do this. And really we could be the model for other cities to have the same platform with their issues, because not everyone has the same challenges or the same conversations, but let this be a model and start these conversations in other areas.
Yeah. And so from your perspective, how did that nomination make you feel? Again, this was a risk to take, but a risk obviously that was that had a lot of positive outcomes and continues to. When you get that recognition, how does that make you feel?
Boy, I was so proud of the staff and also this community, the way people pulled together to make this show happen. So y'all make it look easy on the air, but there's a lot of time, many hours that go into this. You have a focus group now that Tracy helped us to organize when we said we want to do this more regularly. We want to make this available on the air, not just on the web.
Right.
And right. So and Tracy did a lot of the heavy lifting on that to make it work. So I think for me, just knowing that for all the hard work that's going on behind the scenes, for you to have that opportunity to be in the spotlight, to realize that this is being recognized not only locally, but by an organization like the National Association of Broadcasters, was very satisfying.
Certainly.
Very satisfying.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the community, and obviously Tracy as an invaluable resource when it comes to knowing what issues the community is facing and what to talk about on this platform. How important is it, not only just from that perspective, but from a station-wide perspective, to have those type of working relationships with people in the community so that you know what the community is looking for?
It's critically important. When you decide as an organization that one of your goals is going to be to help be a positive force in building a more inclusive community, you have to be very intentional about it so you don't go in halfway.
Right.
And again, that can be a little scary at the beginning. But I think we've done that internally, not just building a staff that's diverse, but building a culture where there's a sense of belonging, right? We talk a lot about DEI, and if you forget the B, which is belonging, it's a fad. And so I think it's been really important. People look to media at all levels, to set an example, to enlighten and inform people. So I think you have to be all in. So you lead by example, and that means being very intentional about diversity and amplifying all voices.
Yeah. And Tracy, from your perspective, how important is it to have working relationships with the media in order to pass along the message that you're trying to pass?
Right. It's so important. I always say everyone has a chance to do this, but not everyone's doing it. So it is a risk to do it, but nationwide, the conversation about Blacks in media and how they're portrayed and how their stories are told aren't necessarily coming from them. And so this is really that opportunity to give the voice to those that don't always have a voice, and to share our experiences and our challenges and our successes as well from us. And so you're getting it firsthand versus through the lens of somebody who may not have lived that experience. So I think this is a good relationship, and it keeps us mission focused at the Lincoln Center on empowering our youth, our families, and our communities by seeing people that look like them on TV, and then being able to hear a story. I talk to the TV so much. My husband will be in the kitchen, and because I don't always watch the shows before they actually air, especially if I'm not involved with it that particular episode. And so I'm in there talking to the TV, and my husband he'll say what first, and then be like, oh wait, you're
Never
talking
mind.
to the TV. So I think it's very important that we get this opportunity. Yes.
So we've talked about how it started. We've talked about what it's doing right now. Let's talk future. What do we think in terms of Real Conversations, where we want it to go in the future?
I will say with Sue. So actually, Real Conversations kind of stopped for a little bit. There was
Yeah.
some staff changing going on here. So she reached out, and I was like, well, actually, I was going to reach out to you. So it kind of happened. So we're meeting. She's like, oh, it's on every week. I'm like, hold on.
I do it every day. If I could talk you guys everywhere.
But I think this is the most consistent it's been. I always say every episode is better than the last episode. So I just was saying to the other staff that they're not on air personalities, but they've come from behind the desk to go on air. And I'm so proud of the work that they've done. And I just think there's always going to be content that will never be a problem, because there's always going to be things that are happening in our community, in the Black community, that need to be talked about. So I'm just glad that we've gone from on the web to on TV, that it's a consistent time that I can say, oh, hey, just tune in on the last Sunday of the month at 10 a.m. And we know it's going to be there, and that it's going to be a good quality show. And you're going to walk away knowing something. Even me, I watch it and I learned something that I didn't know when I turned that TV on. So there's no telling where it could go. I just know that it's going to continue to grow.
I would add to that. I think one of the things that has really been a turning point for us was, instead of making this a pet project of just a handful of people at the station,
Right.
it now feels like more of a collaborative issue, right? So, and that includes people here at TV6 who typically are working in our sales and marketing team and other positions. And when given the chance to come to the table and share their ideas for the show, and then we said, hey, how'd you like to actually sit in, be part of one of those conversations, and maybe even lead one? That's also exciting for me to see people just really spreading their wings and trying new things, and they're doing a great job.
Yes.
Great job.
Yeah, it's been truly fantastic. Lastly, we talked about how this is a program that you really don't see in many places, being done in many places. What do we think about the future of programming like this overall? Obviously, we're tackling very important topics on the show every single month, and these problems exist not only here but in communities all across this nation. Really, every television market could have a program like this. What do we think for the future of programming like this? What would we hope to see come from this as we continue?
Do we agree we're going to do it every week? Although that would be wonderful.
It would be wonderful.
So, but you know what? I think, I think, again, the more we figure this out, right? What kind of resources does it take? What are the topics? I think you collaboratively are actually setting a standard and figuring out how this can be done. And so the more that we master how it works here, the more it's my hope that other stations, other communities will model programs like this. But again, it's not just the program, it's the conversations. Right. So just raising some of these topics, talking honestly about them, and not only participating in the conversations, but listening. And being open to other points of view and other experiences. That to me is the future of this.
For me, it's the same. It's because, like I said, these challenges, these conversations, will always be able to have content for that. I think, for me personally, if you start seeing a shift in your community because of these conversations, then that's when you can go to other communities and be like, this is what we did here. This is what's happening here because of that. I truly believe, everyone only has 24 hours in a day. So I have to be very careful on how I schedule my time out. And this is a priority for me, because I do believe that these conversations can start changing the narrative of the Black community in the Quad Cities. I always say, if we can empower the Black community, we make for a greater Quad Cities at the end of the day. The disparities, we all know the numbers. And so through these conversations, and then through the community coming together, because, this doesn't happen for free, right? It costs to do these things. And I would love to see, different organizations and businesses and to say, we believe in that. So we're going to support you, in that to make sure this happens. And once again, just let this be the model. Let this be the model of what's possible in your community.
Yeah, and that's truly been something to be proud of here in our community, here in the Quad Cities, and you two are a very major part of that. So thank you all for both of you for what you do and what we do to keep this program running.
Yes, thank you.
So from mental health to HBCUs to learning about the experience of being a black man in the Quad Cities and how mothers deal with seeing violent encounters between young men and police, we really covered a lot of topics on this program this year. We've got the whole team here to talk about some of those topics, the ones that stood out to us most. We got everybody, Kothi, Evan, Jasmine, Tracy, and Tim. We are all here, and we'll start on the far end over here of the table as we talk about some of those topics that hit home to us the most and why they did. So Kothi, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, the moment that stood out the most to me was Jasmine had a segment with just a group of moms, and they were all talking about just the different stages of raising their sons, and that resonated to me. I'll let us look at the clip first, and then kind of talk about why.
You have like different stages, like you had to. When you had your youngest, you were junior high school, elementary, having those, different thoughts of how he should navigate. So,
yeah.
How hard was that?
I would say it's really hard all the way around. Just starting and thinking about it, it's literally phases for me because each of my kids are different ages. Off top, just my oldest, not only did he have the fact that he was a black kid, he's a product of a teen mom. So off of that alone, I've always preached to him just the judgment that's going to come along with that. And then from that, we went into the steps of him being a black boy. And then from that, it went into the steps of other things that comes along with that. And then he had, my next son came along, my middle son. So then with him, him having an older brother, I always have to have that conversation with the older brother. So then it comes along with the middle son. Now he has questions about what I'm having conversations with the oldest son about. So it's literally a domino effect for me.
Yeah.
And I think with that, what really stood out the most to me is, so I have a really close relationship with my mom. And it's always just been the two of us, as an only child, which that I remember talking to her a few years ago. You kind of see your children go through different phases where they're almost different people. Where, when you have, obviously, Jasmine, JoJo's 4, so at 4, JoJo's going to be so different than he will at 8, at 12, at 16, at 30. And, you guys who have raised kids can, attest to that. And I think that is really what stood out to me the most with that segment is talking about the different phases. Because it's almost watching one person be multiple people over that little lifetime of theirs, where you have to talk about different things. Like right now, again, specific to JoJo, we were just talking about it off screen, like he likes Peppa Pig. Mm-hmm. But, when he's 14, he might hate Peppa Pig. So, 14-year-old JoJo and 4-year-old JoJo are very different. And Jasmine now will have to view the world so different, than when JoJo is, 10 years in the future. And I think that's what really stood out to me about that is just how you approach raising a child, specifically a son, specifically, a son of color, in all those different stages of life. And so to me that, the second I heard that interview, it was like, wow, like that's kind of just like our conversation and what I would imagine, that is like through the eyes of a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at Jasmine and Tracy, obviously this segment focused specifically on mothers and how they deal with those different stages. Hearing it from Kothi's perspective was very interesting, but from your perspective as the parent in that situation, what were you feeling when you heard some of the things and some of the responses from those mothers?
Definitely empathy and sympathy, because I always say you couldn't pay me enough to be a black man. I don't care how much money you offered me, I don't want that job. And so for my boys, I have 2 sons, and people may say I spoil my sons, but I have to love them, and I love them hard because the world is not going to love them like I love them. And so even when they have a bad day or they've encountered racism, which both of them have, they know they have me at the end of the day to do my best that I can to make it better.
So I definitely agree with what Tracy was saying. So we all know, like my son at the time, I think he was just 3 years old, so he's 4 now. So piggyback to what Kothi said, like, yeah, the 3-year-old JoJo is not the same as the 4, not the same at all.
Right.
Totally different kid. But just again with what Pamela was saying in that interview, you know, she has 3 boys at very different ages and stages in life, and now, you know, I had to teach JoJo at 2 years old. You know, you have nice hands. You know what I mean? So now it's, you know, you have to use nice words. So we're teaching and molding him, which I think every parent does. Doesn't matter what the race is, but I have to navigate and teach him how to be a young black boy. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little extra, you know, tenderness and love and care that we have to give in him, because the world's not nice to him, even at 4 years old, you know? So it's a lot that we have to put in. What we do at home now is, you know, we always are uplifting him and giving him words of encouragement, like, you're strong, you know, you're an awesome kid, you're very smart, you can do anything you want in life, you know, at the age of 4. So
Yeah. And I think that was really the magic of that segment. People, like you said, that is a common practice to kind of uplift and teach your children. But there is that extra element as a young black child, and especially a young black boy. So it was really nice to have that perspective from that segment. Really nice job. All right, Evan, your segment that you enjoyed the most.
Yes, so the topic of mental health can be difficult to talk about, especially within the black community, you know, being vulnerable with black men, if you will. My topic was about a nature walk and how they're helping to combat that.
All right, let's take a look.
Break those generational curses and things that are in our everyday life that we go through and continue to get over as black men.
Each Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, a small group of black men meet at Black Hawk Park for a weekly nature walk.
It being a space where we kind of give ourselves the ability to be vulnerable around ourselves, you know, really talk about stuff that's really kind of going on and not feeling a sense of judgment, not feeling a sense of like apprehension, but just having it be a space where like we can really talk, you know, about things that are past surface.
The group is called Black Men Heal. HEAL standing for heal, empathize, advocate, and love.
More comfortable space to talk about everything that's going on with me as a man. You know, a lot of times we don't go to each other as men and talk about like what's going on in life and just in general. So just being able to have guys that you respect, guys you get along with, and guys who, you know, look like you and have walked through the same things that you walk through in life and just bond off each other has been really amazing.
One walk through the woods at a time, the group is helping to turn over a new leaf when it comes to therapy within the black community.
It's describing kind of like a patriarchy that like we've all kind of like conditioned ourselves to, like of how like a black male is someone who doesn't talk about things, doesn't express things, and like in turn we kind of struggle with ourselves mentally and don't even know about it, you know, unless we're like really conscious of it. So I think just with this group really kind of like understanding that like us doing this work is actually a big role of like undoing patriarchy that's kind of been done unto us.
I have a 4-year-old son, so for me it's just about trying to grow as a man and learn as much as I can and passing it down to him and just help him grow.
For Real Conversations, I'm Evan Denton. And so what stood out to me there was Deshaun Banks saying that, you know, he's got to pass what he's learned now onto his son, so keeping the conversation going, if you will. I was a little worried, to be honest, about doing this story because, well, it was in the woods, and we've seen how horror movies end up for black characters. But no, it's an important topic where it's okay to not be okay, and to really be open about that. And it brought me back to my childhood at the dinner table, if you will. My parents reminding me that there are power in numbers, and being willing to open up about yourself will help you grow down the road.
Absolutely, and even in that clip, the one line that stuck out to me, trying to undo some of the patriarchy that was put on to us. And that is, I think that's a huge talking point when you talk about mental health, and especially with black men. You know, we're almost taught, like conditioned in a way to keep all that under the surface, right? Don't show it, you know, that's, you know, it might be a sign of weakness or what may you. And it's really, really cool to see some of these groups like this really starting to undo some of that, because it's truly something that makes a huge difference. Tim, I want to get your input on this as well, because this is obviously a group that Evan profiled. That was a group of all ages. It looked like people who were young men, people who have been had all the experiences in life as well. How important is that, do you think, to just kind of get everybody together and kind of unpack some of that stuff that it really could weigh people down a lot?
I think it's very important to have all ages, all conversations. The main thing I believe is having those conversations. And a lot of times you have these feelings, people have these, feelings like this, and they do keep it aside. Because as black men, especially, we've been kind of conditioned to hold that in. Don't show that. Yep. And I'm happy to see, and I'm glad to see now that that has changed. And the conversations you was having, just watching, them walking in the woods and having the conversation, just talking. I think sometimes that's all it is and stuff. So I think it's important, and I think a lot of people don't realize it is of all ages. It's not just one age, it's all ages. Let's open up, let's keep that communication going.
Yeah, and Kofi, from your perspective as well, because this is really something that I don't think I've seen before. This is certainly something that you don't see very often, a group of guys just getting together and just being able to unpack. What kind of impact do you think that could have?
Well, I think that could be huge. And I mean, whether it's, a group such as that, or if it's just, hey, you have a very close friend, or, a group of close friends who you can use as that sounding board, whether it's, hey, I'm having relationship problems, hey, I'm having, I can't get my kid to eat, I don't know, mashed potatoes, or something like that, whatever it is, just those different little stressors in your life, whether it's, your job, again, things going on with your family. Like sometimes, especially, again, as men, you're taught not to show any of that, not to be weak, not to, boys don't cry. So, you have all these different things that, like, oh, something's going on in your life, it's, well, tough, deal with it, So I think having a space where you can, have an outlet for those emotions could be, huge.
Yeah, a healthy way to actually deal
Yeah,
with some of those
exactly.
issues.
Yeah,
extremely important. All right, Jasmine.
All right, so my favorite segment from this year was when I was speaking with Director Diggs on the HBCU segment, and we were speaking about the importance of band on campus at HBCU. So we'll
All right, let's take a
look at that. With that being said, why do you particularly think that bands are so important at HBCUs?
A lot of different reasons. I think that, one, the band is the largest student organization on most campuses, and that's the way it should be. But we're also a very visible component of the university. We go out and different places, and we wear these uniforms, and we have these big shiny instruments, and we're playing this music that people like. And so, we essentially become ambassadors for the university. Some schools understand this better than others, of course, right? But you have schools that don't even have football teams sometimes, and their bands are enormous, or you have schools that might only have 1,500 or so students to go there, and they might have 300 or 400 people in the band. But that's because the administrations recognize the value that bands bring, like the recognition that the band could bring. They're coming down the street with their uniforms, and it might say the school's name on the uniform, and then they look good, they sound good, and then kids are looking at the band and saying, I want to go there, So so that's one part of it. The other part of it is because of the entertainment value that we provide to sporting events. We're there, like a lot of times, like some schools will have DJs and stuff like that, but a lot of times the students and the people at the games want to hear the band. They want to hear the band play and see what the band has to offer. And that's a big thing. And I think the final component of that is that a lot of times the band is the first thing you hear when you arrive on campus, and it's also the last thing you hear when you graduate. The band is there for your graduation, and the band is usually there for like your orientation and things like that. So it becomes a large part of the school community in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and it also ties into our culture as well, because we love music, so that's a big part of it as well, if I have to add something. So Director Diggs, he said a lot, but just to dig a little bit deeper from my experience, because I attended a HBCU and I was in the band, it's so important in a bigger scale and a bigger picture, because it's so many opportunities for Black students. So we all know that being in band is expensive, so it's not an opportunity every Black student has. But so just having that within is just beautiful, But how knowing playing an instrument and being in band, it's a world of opportunities that I think a lot of kids miss because they don't know that I can get scholarships for this. They think in order for me to get scholarships to go to school, it's the athletics. I have to play football. And like Director Diggs said, you know, some smaller HBCUs schools, they don't have an athletic program, but they have a music program. So just the beauty of music and the places that it can take these Black students is amazing. And just, again, I'm an advocate for HBCUs. I think every Black student should experience it because it's definitely an experience to see a mass of people who are just like you, who want to better themselves with a higher education, that opportunity that wasn't for us at one point in life. So it's just touching. And like I said, he hit so many points on how important it is to have the band at HBCUs because it's a world of opportunities for students. And I was blessed to experience that.
Yeah. And I think he did a really good job of kind of peeling back the outer layer. Obviously, you see the huge performances and obviously the immense talent that a lot of those bands have, but the opportunities that it provides, both for students who are there and future students, prospective future students, as he said, you know, that recognition of seeing them going down the street, that's all very important. And so I thought that was a really nice way to do that, kind of peel back and really dive into what the meaning of those bands are for people who only see it on the surface. So, yeah, really nicely done. All right, Tracy.
So going back to the episode with the moms, almost half of the moms that were on the panel had not seen the clip of George Floyd. I personally, it took me a couple of months before I watched it. And then I only watched it once. I wasn't going back and watching it over and over because it was too hard to watch. So I chose that clip because I think it's important to understand that being a parent, I won't say just mom, but moms and sons are special. But being a parent of a Black child, specifically a Black boy, in the world that we live in now, it's very difficult. I mean, my boys are grown. They're 28 and 35, and they still have to call me every night, so I know they're okay. If they're out and about, they let me know, hey, here's where I'm at. It gives me peace of mind, but there's still always that little, and they've been raised right. If there's a right or wrong way to raise them, and they understand respecting authority. But it doesn't matter if they come across that one person who doesn't respect them as an individual. So that's the clip I chose.
All right, let's take a look.
So we're going to show the clip of George Floyd and Tyre Nichols. So I'm going to have you ladies just look at the screen real quick, okay?
In the car. I can't move. I've been waiting the whole time, man. Get up, get in the car. Mama. Get up and get in the car right. I can't. Hey, Mike, give me hey, bro. Watch out, watch out. Watch out. Get her in. Mom! Hey.
All right, so after watching the clip of George Floyd and Tyre Nichols and hearing recently about Raheem Carter and other Black men, boys who have been victims of police brutality or who've lost their lives, how does watching that, how does that make you feel?
It breaks my heart. You know, it's just like these men are crying out to their moms because the moms have been their safe place all of their lives, no matter how old they are. And it's very, very hard to watch. And it's just sad.
It is. Piggybacking off of that, it's heartbreaking, it's sad, it's sickening that we have to witness and see that going on in the world.
For me, it's also infuriating that this is allowed to happen over and over. And it seems like sometimes there's not much you can do to combat it. You know, people say comply, but we've also seen where people comply and it still doesn't work out for them. So it's trying to figure out, what do you teach your child to do in that situation, to where they're going to come home and you're not going to see clips of them on TV. So it's pretty sad.
And I refuse to watch it when you said it. And I haven't watched it, either one, to this day, because it's just nothing that I want to witness. Like, I feel like I'm a witness to what has happened to these two. And so I just put my head down, because I still to this day have not been able to bring myself to watch it. During each of these murders, people share, and I can't even bring myself to even be that one. And I always question why you're sharing it, but to hear them call out for their mothers, that's something different. That hits different.
Right.
And it's emotional, but I refuse to watch either one.
And I can relate to that, because when George Floyd, that was all over the media, I was not a mother at the time. So I watched it, but, it's a different perspective when you are a mother. So with Tyre Nichols, I refused to watch it as well. This was my first time seeing it, just because it could easily be one of our boys calling out for, us,
Yeah.
So I totally relate.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, and that was probably the heaviest topic that we covered this year. Tracy, we heard from those parents, those mothers who had obviously visceral reactions to seeing that video. You mentioned yourself that it took you a very long time to watch it. When you hear them kind of tell their reactions to it, what do you think about your reaction? How does that compare?
It's right along, with them. I can't imagine. I can't imagine what their families have went through. And the fact that it gets shared a lot, it is that initial reaction, like, why would you share this? But I think that's the difference between now and when these same things were happening in the 60s and 70s, and they couldn't be recorded. So it's very easy to say, oh, he probably didn't do this, or he probably didn't do that, or he probably did this, versus now when you see the whole scenario and how it went down, and that they've complied or they didn't do what you said they did, and then this is still what happens. And so I know part of Real Conversations is to have conversations that are uncomfortable, right? But to also give the perspective of the Black community in the Quad Cities, and those things that you think are happening in Minneapolis and Atlanta and Chicago are happening right here in the Quad Cities. And those are it's these type of things that we need to share, because through education and engagement, it comes understanding. And so that's what the ultimate goal of this is to understand that there are different perspectives. There are different sides to stories. Not everyone is exaggerating or making things up, or it's not that bad. It can be. So understandably so, when you see those, you do get upset. You get emotional, because that could be my son. But knock on wood, it hasn't been yet. And hopefully things start to change.
Absolutely. Tim, I want to get your perspective as well, because we got the side of the mother, but from a male perspective, when you see those type of videos, what is your reaction?
First reaction, is anger, of course. I think everybody's anger, but right away, it's a hurt. You feel it, because you know that this could be my son, and then it could be me. It could be any one of us, men at the table here. And like you said, sometimes, whether they comply, they don't comply, some of the force that you see this, sitting here watching this clip again, like you said, it's probably one of our most, forceful ones. Tears come to your eyes, because it hit home, and you are worried about your sons, your loved ones, and your friends. A lot of people some people don't understand how sometimes when police ride up behind us and we're just driving, that fear just is this the time? It might not stay with you long, but you think it. So it's you have to have the conversations with your young ones, and even as men, we have to talk about this. So,
yeah, very important conversation, no doubt about it. All right, Tim, your segment that you.
I tell you, the segment. I mean, all these segments have really touched, and I'm glad we're doing this as a station, as a in this community. But the one that hit with me as well was mental health. You know, and especially when it regards to someone in the family. And so when I believe on this clip here, we have a little bit of that more conversation. You mentioned your mom having some issues there as you were growing up and stuff. As you know, I also have someone in my family, that has some mental health issues as well. And I see what that does for that immediate family. I want to touch on a little bit of that, you know, and especially with, you know, you personally, but also what you see in the Quad Cities, because some people think it's just this person has a mental health issue and they're the only ones dealing with it. But talk about how it affects the family.
Absolutely. So my mom, with her specific bipolar disorder, she's like fine 90% of the time, like no issues. And then like once every few years or so, she'll go into a manic state or a super depressive state. I would say, you know, being a kid, it was kind of scary. Not that she ever did anything scary herself, like she wasn't abusive or anything like that. It was just, my mom isn't my mom right now. Little weird. I was like the main person that could convince her to get treatment. And I was a kid, teenager. So that was a lot of pressure. Like, being the one that was responsible. I'm the oldest and a girl, so there you go. There you go. There you go. And I would say as I got older and became an adult, the getting hospitalized is a lot harder than it used to be. Like when I was a kid, we could, as long as she was voluntary, she could get admitted. Now you have to be actively homicidal or suicidal. And my mother has never been suicidal or homicidal until the last few years, because she got to that point because they wouldn't hospitalize her. And going through that system of trying to get my mom the care that she needs and then listening was just, it's very aggravating. Like trying to find the hospital, be like the same hospital that I went to when I was 10 with her. And it would be no problem. She was like the main block to getting in. Otherwise they would take her. Now it's like, she has to be suicidal in the moment. I personally feel like that's telling someone if they have stage 1 cancer, wait till you have stage 4 cancer to get treatment. So, but I would say that, you know, her taking time off of work, it would impact finances, whatever symptoms that came with it. And of course, like if you have a family with mental health diagnoses, you will most likely have a mental health diagnoses as well. So like there is a genetic component as well, or just like the trauma that you experience because of their mental health diagnoses can impact you as well.
Okay.
My mom actually was diagnosed with bipolar disorder after my brother was born. And so like growing up, seeing her in the hospital, going through the system and that is probably that is definitely what encouraged me. She's my whole motivation of why I wanted to work in the mental health field. And then as I went through college, and I went to college in a very, let's just say, racist town. Felt like I was in the 1950s, let me tell you. It was interesting, but I think that is what drove like the social justice aspect of it, that experience. And then like through grad school, I saw that there really are a lot of disparities when it comes to therapy for people of color and by people of color.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people can relate to, especially, you know, having that dynamic where you want to get somebody help. And obviously that can be just with anybody that's in your life. But when it's your family, that really adds another component to it.
It adds another component to it. Whether, you know, if it's a sibling, a child of yours, or a parent like Simone was talking about, it's totally on a different level then. And what's really frustrating and what pulls at your heart is that sometimes, you know, if they realize they need help, it's a little easier sometimes if the help is there. But the problem where it comes in, what's tough, is when that person that has that issue doesn't realize it. They don't think they have a problem, and you have to watch what they go through. You're afraid for them, you're afraid for yourself, but you're also afraid for the public as well. But you still have to love this one. And I thought it was just very interesting to hear. Before we had the conversation, I didn't know about her mom, what she was walking through, but a lot of things that she did mention in my family, that dynamic, I saw that, and we see it now, but it just doesn't affect that one person, it affects the whole family because you all care, and you're trying to get help. There's some help out there, but then I don't have all the answers, it has to be more. There's gotta be more help out.
Absolutely, and just having that conversation and really kind of labeling out, kind of putting out there some of the options that there are, and really just kind of depending on each other to kind of get yourself through some of those issues is very important.
Yes.
Indeed. So nice,
Yes.
really nice job. So lastly, for my favorite moment, and you just kind of mentioned it, Tim, we've done so many fantastic segments. Everybody up here had an amazing segment, and so it was very difficult to pick one. But for this one, we're going to go back to that HBCU episode and a conversation we had with a woman who is known very well in this community, but not too many people know her story of triumph. Didn't come with a lot of turnover, though, and turmoil. And as she worked to set herself up for success in a time where the road to get there was not an easy one for Black people, we're going to take a look at our conversation with the Rock Island NAACP leader, Bonnie Ballard.
The thing that they told you that after 5 years, you should go back and get more education. And I didn't want to wait for 5 years, so I started looking for a school a couple of years after I graduated and was teaching. And there was no school that would accept me as a in business education. So that was because of segregation. So after I couldn't find a school I knew I couldn't find a school in Mississippi. So I found a school out in Gunnison, Colorado. And I went out there for, I think it was 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And I found out that, well, what happened was I was sitting in the front row and this young lady, white girl, teacher from Alabama was sitting behind me. And, I just like people, I don't care. So she kicked my purse over. And I thought it was an accident. So she kicked it over again. And the instructor looked at me and he looked at her. And I guess he became so angry. He said, okay, I'm stopping this class right now. And I'm divided into 2 groups. Bonnie Ballard, I want you to be the moderator of that group. And I was just so shocked. I don't know who he another group, but I knew I had to get myself, make sure I had my stuff together. So the next morning, I moderated my group, and this young lady, bless her heart, she came up to me and she said, "How did you learn to do that?" And I looked at her and I smiled. And that's all I did. I didn't say a word. But what she did for me, she told me that I needed to go back to Mississippi and register at Delta State University, who was an all-white school that was maybe 10 minutes from my house. I would never spend another dime going out of Mississippi for an education. And of course, I got my master's. And I got a call. Rock Island Public School System. They needed a Black counselor that had a master's degree. My sister was working in the area, in the system. So Mr. Austin said to her, "Annie, know anybody that got a master's degree, a Black person got a master's degree in guidance and counseling?" And she said, "Yeah, my sister just graduated from Delta State University." And he said, "You think she'll come?" She said, "I don't know. I can give you her telephone number." And she did, and he called me.
So a couple things about that. First off, I've known Bonnie for a long time. never heard that story before. It was an amazing story. It was amazing to hear. And I think it's very important to hear those stories of what people went through at that time, and really get a better understanding of how far we've come. Whereas we still have some work to do, obviously, but we have come a long way, and our ancestors and the people that have come before us have done a fantastic job of allowing us to be where we are today. And another thing, though, that was interesting, I mean, you know, when you hear about those type of stories, segregation and things like that, there's kind of like a framework around it where, oh, this happened oh so long ago, this is ancient history. Bonnie Ballard is alive and well.
Right, it wasn't that long ago.
It was not that long
No.
ago, you know. And so I think that's another important part of that, just telling those stories and again, making sure people know that this is something that was not all that long ago. This is something that we need to be aware of, and we need to be listening to these stories so we don't repeat history.
Right.
Right.
Now, we talked about, so Bonnie was at an HBCU, then went to school in Colorado. Jasmine, you talked about your experiences at an HBCU. When you hear those stories of people who came before you and went to those types of those schools, and some of the struggles that they had to go through just to get by, what does that make you feel? And when you look back at your experience and how it differed?
So, what it was, because Miss Bonnie, she actually went to Alcorn, so I totally can relate to her. She was the same school. So like when she was painting the picture of you know, beneath the shades of the giant trees, it's true. It's a beautiful experience. But obviously, you know, she wanted to further her education, and going all the way to Colorado, the fact that she wasn't or didn't feel accepted was one thing, but the fact that it encouraged her to go back to Mississippi and go to Delta State, where it was a predominantly white school, and encourage her to, you know, I need to go back to my roots because I belong there, is powerful. It's powerful, and it's even more amazing that Alcorn did that for her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it was where she saw where, you know, it's again that Black experience where her professors installed everything that she needed to be successful and go all the way across the world, because you know, when you're from Mississippi, it's nothing other than Mississippi, right? But to go, you know, across the world, and then to come back and say, you know, I'm going to do something that no one in her community probably ever thought of doing.
Right, yeah.
Is like I said, it's beautiful. It's so encouraging, and like you said, it paved the way for us. You know, that's a beautiful story, and she needs to tell it more, to let people know that you can do anything you put your mind to.
When I hear stories like that, I have to check myself sometimes. Like, how dare I complain about this when this is what they went through just to go to school, just to have a job. So how dare I complain?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've talked a lot about being comfortable in uncomfortable spaces, especially when it's to your benefit and you're working towards improving your future. Again, when you hear stories like that, it almost kind of affirms exactly what we're talking about, and it's based off of those experiences that the people before us have gone through, and it's really helped us be where we are today. So it's really important. Absolutely. We've had a fantastic year, no doubt about it. And we've covered a lot of fantastic topics. You all have done fantastic jobs covering those topics. So thank you to all of you for the hard work that you guys did this year. It's wonderful. We are going to wrap it up here today, but before we go, we do want to pay tribute to a man who is well known and well loved in this community. Reverend Kenneth Porter passed away earlier this year. The Tennessee native eventually made his way to the Quad Cities and made this his true home, getting involved in many different Quad Cities causes, all while going through several personal health battles. You may remember him detailing some of those on this very program back in April, sharing his story and talking about how important it is to be your own health advocate. Wise words from a wise man who will be greatly missed. Reverend Ken Porter was 61 years old. And before we go today, we want to remind you that today's program is brought to you in partnership with Together Making a Better Community at the Lincoln Center. TMBC at the Lincoln Center is the hub for resources and events and programs in the African American community in the Quad Cities. To hear more about what they've got going on over at the Lincoln Center, you can visit their Facebook page, TMBC at the Lincoln Center. That's going to do it for Real Conversations this time. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Have a great day.